Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you again. Today, we're going to talk about a kind of next step from what we talked about yesterday. Yesterday, I had the subject of preparation. Today is the presentation in general for teachers, is different tips and also is different and different kinds of things that you have that be, you know, highly prepared and successful, basically, in the end, in presenting as a teacher. Okay, so the first thing is that you need to a kind of set rule and a kind of as organized ideas that you have to present. So basically, do you like to obviously age, the subject, and what you have here? You prepared with the curriculum, the objectives. You had the meetings. You made sure that everything you need to know as a teacher, okay, is there. So everything you need to know as a teacher is there. You need to know all the everything, especially if you're new. Here for every day, it's different. Okay, for a whatever course, whatever institution. Here, here, if you are new or in the beginning of the year, then just make sure that everything is set and you're all organized and you know everything that is important for you to know as a teacher and all the information. And part of it, obviously, if you are with younger age, is meeting the parents. Sometimes no, you don't have to, right? After middle school, even fifth grade depends on the culture where you are. Middle school, afterwards, it's not really an essential part. In high school, even obviously, and then afterward, university, you just meet the person, and adults obviously is different, very different. Maybe you'll meet their relatives or their family or whatever, okay, or their children. So it's very different, okay. It's a different story, and professor, or that's very different, obviously. So this is all into consideration. What's important here is that you know that everything that you need to know um, uh, to prepare. Okay. Um, so in that, you um, you have that you had there. Okay. And um, you have to consideration. Okay. Now let's go in the middle. If you are in the middle of the year, or if you have a different kind of if you have a different kind of issue, okay, maybe you feel like it's kind of mundane and boring, it's redundant, you want to change, great, but make sure that you are on the right track with and nothing will change basically that will cause a challenge to you. Okay, if it's opposite, that's great, right? So this is what's important here. What's important is that if you are in the middle of the year and suddenly you feel like you are a math teacher, you say, okay, I want to change the style of the class. It was great, but it's kind of boring, the same thing. Sometimes you may run into problems and you think about they don't like the style. Sometimes it may have a negative effect on the class. um, Sometimes you find the environment will not accept it. So what's important here is not to know that it's not every, okay, it's also about different things that are important. For example, being in line with the environment, like we said, being prepared and making sure whatever change you want is positive. So here you can make the challenge into positive if you read into it, in the sense of you make sure that whatever event or whatever ideas you have is welcoming for the students and for the environment they're in. Okay. So for example, if you're a math teacher in middle school, it may be they're used to that every time you have a kind of presentation, which is important. You feel like you want to have it more challenging for them and interesting. So instead of having a presentation in the beginning of class, you want them to have a nice discussion of what they had a homework in or whatever, or not a discussion. They in a group, instead of you presenting, they look at it and they look at the material and they present. It's a kind of, maybe you went to a conference, or maybe you had that idea of why not make it more interesting for them. It's maybe they don't welcome it and it's a challenge, or you find that there's a kind of weakness in the sense of they are not getting all the ideas that you want them to get. So if they're not getting all the ideas that want them to get, and make sure that they know it. So in this sense, you have a different kind of approach. Okay, that different kind of approach comes in the sense of you can make that into an advantage, which is, I as a teacher, maybe for example you're in middle school, okay, you're the middle school math teacher. I as a teacher believe that these points are important. So did anyone get these points as a group? Okay, I didn't, you know, uh, you didn't discuss these points. Okay, and so you would say, for example, why didn't you think these points are important? Maybe you would talk about the importance of these points, um, the importance and why they're important. Okay, and you want to know more about, you can make it into this challenge into a positivity or a kind of advantage, in the sense of it's a skill in math class in middle school that they would get to know themselves more, and their 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 fellow peers more, having an environment of project based rather than just listening in class to the teacher. So they're being more independent with math material and prioritizing the important information rather than the details or whatever. Okay. So and getting the important information basically, and they see its importance for them, and they see that skill is vital for them, not only in math but in all other subjects. So actually they welcome it. Okay, it's a new kind of strategy used because you felt like you want to change for the class and for them to be more active. And it may be that it makes you more comfortable in the end for maybe more challenging objectives for the or for the curriculum that you can get to, and you can get the students, maybe you have an average above average in the class. You can get the average to go up in, and that would be great. And maybe you can have challenging the year, maybe topics that were much easier for the class than before. Okay, in that sense. But just make sure that if you want to change the style, it's welcoming for the students and for the environment. Another one is, for example, you're an English teacher and you highly believe that this novel is, the class is going great, but it's the level is not that great. Okay, you highly believe that this novel is for the class, although it's more challenging. So in this sense, you would explain to the class. You can take a vote, and then based on the vote, they would they would go by, okay, and they would accept. Okay, so based on the vote, they would accept, and they would go by with the new novel rather than the scheduled novel you have. In that sense, you would say why it's more challenging, and you would explain it so that it would not be a surprise, especially if you have it on the curriculum or if you have it in the syllabus, in the sense that they're all organized for maybe they're prepared, maybe they read it before. So just to take a vote. Okay, if the vote is great, then that's great. As a class, they decided upon that novel. Okay, in that sense, and they have to go by the vote. It may be a challenge. Others they don't accept, but that's how it is, and so that's how you would do it. Or you can break the class into two. Since of this novel, But usually what's important just to be into, especially in middle school, in middle school, you can actually do a kind of project-based group work with the novel, in the sense of, instead of all the class reading one novel, groups of people read different novels, okay, which is nice and interesting. But in middle school, usually if you take a vote for cooperation values and advantages, it goes back to advantage. Obviously, they respect it. Okay, so you respect the fact of the results, and that's how it is. In high school, it's a given, right? So in high school, actually, they would like it because they are into, developing their skills for university level, and you would find that they have this intrinsic motivation of developing their skills so that uh, they can succeed, and they can be they succeed, and they can be very, very um, um, they succeed, and they can be very, flexible in the university. Usually students in high school, they have these objectives, okay, because you'd find that they're into the fact of going to university, going to the next level, going to that kind of their personal skills, especially in language and literature. So that's actually, and usually, if they kept on in English, that means they're into it in that sense, okay. And so that's what's important, right? What's important here is that it's nice for you to have a kind of, in the presentation, especially in class, or with if this is in school setting, in other settings, it's nice for you to, to have a kind of nice relationship with the students, and also to know their levels, what they like and everything else. But also at the same time, it's nice for you to have a kind of privacy for the class, so the class can have their independent kind of character, which is part of the presentation skills. So some classes or some groups of students, you'll find that this is obviously not one-on-one. One-on-one also included, but this is like a group. Especially if it's a big group, then obviously they have their own character as a group. And it may be they're very strict. It may be no, they're very creative, all in all. There are exceptions. And usually if it's a big group, the exceptions would be these certain students would, you know, uh, and that's nice if you have a big group. This is part of presentation skills. Maybe if the big group that you're teaching here, all in all, they're very into projects, and they're very creative for whatever reason. They're not into assessment, written, or individual presentation by you. They're more oriented toward assessments and projects they like to do together, or maybe you present and it's a very interactive discussion, and so forth. It's not only you talking, basically. You find different individuals, they have a different style, and maybe you can, for a change, let these individuals, have their own style. Maybe they like more to work on their own rather than discuss as a class. Maybe they can present on their own. Maybe they like to take certain assessments or take certain kinds of reports, or certain kinds of assessments extra that they like. Now it depends. Some they do like as extra work, right? Others they like to do it as a substitute for their projects, and so forth. Okay, so this is really important because the um, the work that the work obviously here is different. So obviously it can be a nice change. Okay, there might be a challenge in the sense of you may be disorganized, or they may be disorganized. Sometimes you can get lost because the big class and the exceptions. Okay, so what's important here is that it's an advantage for you if you can control that, and it's not an issue. Okay, in a sense of um in the sense of you see that, okay, great, let's have a, you as teacher has an organization in the sense of you have a list, maybe you have an Excel sheet, you have a person in class that's your assistant, and or you have an assistant or your assistant, and this person helps you out in it, and they have their own class Excel sheet in the sense of they know, you presented in the beginning of class, you have the names and the different assignments or the different things they need to do. So in this case, it may be a lot of exceptions and it's no problem. Instead of you having your own kind of booklet, you have the Excel, the assistant sheet on the presentation board, and everyone knows exactly what's going on, the due date and everything else. Because here everyone has their own kind of assessment or project or whatever. Okay, this can be a nice style. This is kind of like going in a different kind of direction with big classes, because big classes, it is harder to deal with them, like big number of students, to have the kind of traditional just breaking up into groups or whatever, or even a class discussion. Now the class discussion or in a big group is actually very effective, and it's and the presentation as a teacher, even if there's no class discussion, is actually very effective, and it's very what's it called, it's very efficient, and it's actually the traditional way of going through things. Now sometimes teachers, especially in science classes or other scientific ones, if it's a big class and it's in university level, sometimes you'll find different things that sometimes you'll find different things that basically um, sometimes you'll find different things that basically makes them, in the sense of the class makes them kind of excited about the topic. So you may find that you might find as a teacher, you want them to have a positive approach. Maybe they are this first year university or whatever, or maybe a high level university class, in the sense of that they have different emphasis or different kind of interests in different subjects or specializations. So what you can do is that in the time of class, not necessarily in the lecture, they have to be in the lecture, and the lecture is general. They have a specialization. They can use that time to work on their project. You can have, for example, a place like a lab or a place for the department, and they can do their specialization work in that time period. They may choose to present for the class, and you may have due dates for their presentation, whatever specialization they have. They may choose to have a kind of booklet for whatever specialization they have at the end. And in the sense, obviously not all the time they're in specialization, they go to lecture, and in the sense of a balance, so that they can get the important topics with their specialization. It may be that they can teach the specialization, and it's part of the year, in the sense of maybe you can choose, or maybe they can choose voluntarily whatever system you want. Obviously, you need to be highly organized at the beginning of the year for this and have it with them. Not only in Excel sheet, it's in the syllabus, and they know exactly the date and time. And they can choose the specializations they want, or you can have specializations that they choose from. It depends on what you want, in the sense. Okay. So this is really important, because in a big class, usually university level, in high school you can do it, right? Depends. So if it's like an elective, or if it's like an after school, or if it's like something that usually the students are highly interested in, and they do it not as a general subject, but something that they chose to for university or for other objectives. So in that case, you have that. Okay. There are other strategies and other things when you want to change the kind of typical style, which is obviously highly effective and very important. But it's important for you to know that it's organized, it's for the environment, you're well prepared for it. And that is like we talked before, the other factors of preparation, as well as in the presentation itself, to make sure that it's all organized, they all have the information needed, and the class and the environment is prepared for the change. If you have challenges, try to make it for your advantage, and that's what's important for the presentation for teaching styles. As for children in young years, obviously it's much more complicated in the sense of you have other factors and it may be more challenging, especially that you have to be highly traditional in your. If you are an experienced teacher and you feel you're comfortable, why not? A lot of teachers, after many years and high experience, they do choose to have their own kind of style, and they do choose to change from day to day. And I think that's a great opportunity. However, if if you run into challenges, and if you, especially that you have to make sure, usually you have other assistants, you have the environment of the school. If you feel like the programs and activities you're doing are getting disorganized, and getting kind of what's it called, um, getting kind of out of um, getting disorganized, or getting kind of out of scope of the objectives. For maybe your assistants have different demands, they can't they can't go with the you know with the changes you're doing in this, you have to go back. Elementary and kindergarten are more challenging. The higher years in elementary, obviously it's much more easier because it's more structured, and actually it's for their benefit. But for KG and grade 1 and 2, usually it's nice. Anyways, they have a curriculum that's very interactive usually, and so it's nice to be organized and not to let the children get lost. Okay, in that sense. So this is what's important, and um, and so forth. Okay. For these years, actually, there's a lot written about in education psychology for presenting as a teacher, and there's extensive research on it, especially for developmental psychology for young years, and for educational psychology. What's important here is that um, you have all of these in mind, and to have to go, especially in these young years, to go to the research that is written, and maybe to look more into, which is more important obviously, is the research, but it's not theory wise, it's really what is it, the environment. Okay, so you're effective, you're there, you have your style and you're ready, but you make sure that the environment is ready for these changes. It may be the parents are not very happy, it may be opposite. If that, you can make it into an advantage in the sense of the parents are actually highly content with the changes. This can be very challenging and you can learn a lot, but if it goes into the if it goes into the um, if it goes into the red light, in the sense of finish, you find that the assistants and everyone else is not really anticipating for that change, or it's not very effective, then you can all in all easiness go back to this, to the old style. Especially that it's important for you to have a kind of set examples for the others in the class, especially if you're a class teacher, and you don't want to get them lost, basically. Okay. So you don't want to get them lost. This is really important because obviously it's high in stress, high in demand, and in the young years they get obviously it's more about being effective with them, catching their attention, having just nice activities, because they can get, or if it's something new they're not used to, it may be opposite, they love it, or it may be that it needs some, attraction and so forth. And especially that, you need to keep in consideration that you have assistance and you have the environment, and maybe it doesn't suit the environment very well. Okay. So the opposite side of that is that it may be actually not a challenge and it's an asset for you, the change. If it does happen, then that's great. You have no problem. Actually, can you do it all the time? And the assistant and the class, and you can do it in the future years, in the sense of it's a technique and style that you can use always with children in whatever case you have. Okay. If there's a challenge, it's nice for you to record and see why. Maybe the assistants are not used to these changes and teaching styles. Maybe the classroom, you have maybe some students who are in learning diversity, or not necessarily learning diversity, other students who you feel are uncomfortable with the changes for different reasons, and so it doesn't suit them. So, usually there's a stress on the class management in the sense of class organization and locations, and where the children are sitting, where the children are working, and the different styles there. Okay. So this is important, and it's important to have that kind of set what actually went wrong, I guess. Okay. It may be that the environment did not um, was not a kind of set rule, in the sense of, it wasn't suitable for these activities. You needed, this is a easy, this is a, um, usually it does happen, in the sense of it's usually what happens sometimes. Okay. It's the traditional example of what goes wrong is that it's too much activity in the class, and the children got very obnoxious, and so you felt like these activities are, if we're outside it was great, then that's great. Okay. Then you would have to maybe get an alternative, a kind of different activity to do in class. Okay. Which is similar in this sense to the activities, the activities that you have. Okay. So this is really important, because the set rule here is that, you need to always make sure that if you have a challenge, you make an advantage. If you can't, then go back, especially with the children, young years, from KG to third grade maximum. Second grade, third grade is great. Usually they have this intrinsic motivation to be in a set, organized class, and to hold responsibilities. It's part of being mature. They have this intrinsic motivation and this reinforcement environment to always develop in these. So in third grade, it's actually a good opportunity, but in the younger years, it's actually much harder. So usually, especially in the environment, it can be delicate in young years, and it can affect maybe different activities or different things. But anyways, maybe you're highly experienced, and that's great, and you're the assistant with you and everything else. The environment does encompass and support such changes, but it's important for you to know that whatever that, make sure that it doesn't affect the classroom kind of organization. Sometimes in the young years, some changes can make a vital or detrimental issue. And that's why usually they're very picky about the schedule and about how it goes. And especially if it's obviously nursery. Yeah, especially if it's nursery and KG1, KG2, first grade, second grade, and so forth. Okay. For the other levels, higher, no. Elementary, yeah, you have to, still be cautious. And then you have in middle school, you can, in the sense of, if you're in middle school teacher, it's much more flexible, obviously. But in other realms, you need to also be a cautious sense of making the challenge into an advantage as soon as possible. Rather than high school students are more flexible. They have high intrinsic motivation for the subjects, especially for specialization. Like I said, you can even do like university level style, which is, it depends on the maturity, it depends on the intrinsic motivation, the environment, the support of the environment for such cultures. Sometimes they can even, there are classes in high school where, for example, this is the specialization of technology, and not only math and science, but it's maybe after school or electives technology class, okay, or art class in specialization of acting for certain kinds of modes or whatever, okay, or for example doing a play, okay, or for example for art, a certain kind of art that's really rare and they do it in school, okay. So in that sense, okay. Anyways, this is a kind of um, this is a kind of this is a kind of different, what's it called, different of different kind of you know style, or it's an option you can have, basically, okay. Now, going back to the presentation skills, it's nice for you to always think about, if you want to change or anything else, so that you don't feel like you're going down in your presentation skills as teacher. You don't feel like it's routine, so you're dependent, or this is your teaching style. No, you can do different changes, which is why it's advisable to go to conferences to read. But this is theory wise. You have to also look at your practical world around you, so the environment. And not only that, is it may not be routine, maybe opposite, it may be high unstable. Now, highly unstable, it can be stressful for you as a teacher, and then that gets an opposite effect, okay. If it's highly stressful for you as a teacher, that means that you won't be comfortable. And it's not wrong to change, or it's not wrong to kind of make stability around you, okay. Cost stability, maybe it's things out of control, okay. So in that sense, it's important for you to think about, how can I control and feel comfortable and stable in this environment if I want to stay. So if you want to stay, yeah, how should I? Okay. So in that sense, you have a kind of different objectives and different steps that you can take. And in the sense, if you have that challenge of making it more stable, you can obviously connect with the head department. They can have their own strategies because they know the environment, they may have faced the same challenges before. You can also think about new strategies here. New strategies are very nice. Maybe you can go back to things in when your old textbooks, or online, or different things you can find on YouTube for different strategies, which is nice. Okay, maybe also you can see that for securing kind of a stable environment, if it's mature years and older years, you can have the class to cooperate with you. And I think that that's one of they feel responsible and part of the stability, basically. Okay. And it may be external factors, maybe that are the traditional ones, which are war or disease or outbreak or whatever. But the other ones, it may be that for some reason the department is not that strong anymore, and so maybe you were dependent on technology tools or other tools, and it's the tools are not applicable, or they are not they're not basically as open or for the usage anymore like before. For different reasons, the department is going down. So if that's the case, then you'd have to have alternatives, and it obviously depends on the subject. Other subjects are more than others that you need these tools. So in that sense, you maybe you can do alternatives in the sense of, you know, maybe remote at home. Okay, but obviously, remote, or obviously there are many things that maybe you need to do in class. So in that sense, maybe um, you can, as a lecturer or as a teacher, show them, or they can participate in a kind of style that you can do with them, so that they can get the hands-on experience of whatever subject you have of technology. Okay, for example. Another example is that you feel like uh, the the style of the class is very, very inexperienced for university level. So the mixture doesn't have a lot of experience, and your objective is to have a specialization maybe in that class. So that gap makes it hard for you to have your objectives obtained. So you try to let them have in your curriculum of the year um, maybe more information, or more lectures, or more topics about experience rather than theory. So you can obtain in the end the specialization objective they have for the course. I don't know. Okay. So this is an example. These all affects your presentation, presentation style or technique, or whatever decision you make. Okay. Now, if you're on the right track, and guess what? It's great, then it's great. Okay, but these are just different tips. And now, if you're a fresh graduate, you have to keep these into consideration, to always remember that the teaching style you have, and the presentation that you keep on going, it might not, this is it might be great, and you can, if you want to change or develop, that's great. But just keep in mind that, if you're going to try to make it into advantages, or kind of a kind of um, positive kind of skills or base for you as a career. Okay, so maybe in the beginning of your career, you are in a school, in high school, and they want after school activity for you are a drama teacher for a play, and actually you are in, and you're the drama teacher, and you make the play. You're still fresh. It's a challenge for you, no problem. You go, you make it for your advantage, and for your it comes towards you. So or it comes for you rather than against you. So here, what's important is that you stress on that, and you can record or take note of how you made that challenge and what techniques to use, so you can use it afterwards, because it was successful by the environment. You're new, it's successful with the students, and it was a successful play in the end. So make sure that whatever you did, you can use afterwards, and all, you don't have to change. You can if you want. Some it depends on some characters, they like to always change. Okay, and that's their character, and that's great. But others, just to if you're just this average that wants to know, make sure you record and you see the positive and the negative, the pros and cons, what was successful, what needed work, why did that happen, and different things. That is an essential part of going to the next part, which is developing or building, and make it so much easier for you in these steps, so that you can move on to other and maybe other things you never thought that you can do in the school or in your career as a drama teacher, or other things you have in mind. Maybe you have other things in mind that you want to do as a teacher in that field. Okay, so this is an example, okay, of a fresh graduate, and it's an example of you can record and take note. Now, not necessarily that you are every day taking notes. No, it can be in the end of the semester. It can be in the end of the day. It can be in the end of the week. It can be in the end of the month. Okay, so it's not like something that you stress about it. No. Okay, you also want to have a nice time in your profession. Okay, which is which um, which is important, right? Because you don't want to stress yourself out, basically, on these points. You want to have a well-being in your job, so that you can like your job, you can like your profession, and its intrinsic motivation, and the other factors, and extrinsic, and whatever you may call them, the other ones, which are important for you to be successful in the field. Okay, so this is also um, this is also what's important in that sense. Please add your comments, add your questions. If you have certain topics, if you have certain inquiries, I would be more than happy to discuss with you, to have you as a guest here on these topics. I'm usually talking about career. This week I decided to do something about teaching styles. It's been some time I didn't, like over a year. So if you are interested in teaching styles and in education more, and more of how to present, or other subjects about teaching styles, please don't hesitate to contact me. We can do a kind of discussion here. You can send me your inquiries, questions I can talk about afterwards. Please share and subscribe to my channel. I'll be more than happy, and have a great day and summer. Bye.